Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Power of Knowing Forum's LinkedIn Live Podcast 94. Today we are in discussion on the topic of beyond connectivity, exploring IoT's role in telecommunications. We have the honor of having Mr. Sunil David, an IT leader with 29 years of experience in IT telecom domain, served closely 20 years with AT&T, providing services to global 100 firms. Without further ado, let's bring Mr. Sunil David to the show. Hi, Sunil.
Yeah,
Good evening.
hi.
Hi, Sunil.
Yeah,
Can
hi,
you hear?
hi, Prem. Hi, Prem. Thank you for inviting me for your show. Thank you.
Yeah. Sunil, starting with the queue, how do you see the role of IoT evolving in telecommunication industry in the next 5 years?
Right, Prem. I'll answer your question in two parts. So one is how IoT is really helping the telecommunication service providers itself, because
Mhm.
within the service providers operations, a lot of IoT is being used, and I'll expound on this subsequently. But we are seeing a lot of value deploying IoT within our operations, whether it is managing the fleet,
Mm.
whether it is monitoring equipment, whether it is optimizing energy within our buildings. So enough and more use cases where IoT is definitely helping the telecom industry, including managing data centers and so on, optimizing cooling and so on.
Mm.
Now, the telecom providers are definitely seeing a lot of potential in terms of positioning IoT to enterprise customers, and that's
Mm.
where the telecom industry is really seeing that as a next growth engine. Telecom service providers traditionally are very strong in providing data and voice services, but IoT is definitely a good growth engine. And you're talking about evolution, Prem. A few things which I wanted to tell you.
Mm.
One, what we are seeing is that the options for connectivity will be a lot more compared to what it was in the past. Already we are seeing that happen, but this will get accentuated even more in the future. So, for example, you can use cellular. Again,
Mm.
in cellular, you have different options. We are using 5G now. In the future, 6 or 7 years from now, we're going to see 6G, where the speeds are going to be much, much faster. We are also seeing increasingly use of satellite networks as an option
Mm.
for connectivity, especially locations where you cannot have cellular towers built or fiber laid. So the use of satellite, Wi-Fi will get a lot more better, more
Mm.
optimized for IoT. So we are going to see this clearly playing out. A lot more options for connectivity going forward in the next few years. Second thing is, Prem, um, networks are also going to get a lot more intelligent. So networks will be a lot more AI powered. So there'll be these concepts like self-healing networks. Networks would heal on its own, autonomous networks. So a lot more AI being used on networks. So we can actually call them intelligent networks. That's the
Mm.
number two. A couple of other things. So one is software-defined networking. You may have heard this term. So we're going to see a lot more use of all the orchestration and control done through software. We already started that many years back, but that will get accelerated even further going forward, where you're going to use a lot more software to orchestrate and control the networks. And a simple example I want to give you is SIM cards, which are used in IoT devices. Today, they're all physical SIM cards. Now you can actually use soft SIMs, so you really don't need to have a physical card installed, right? So just wanted to give you that example to highlight that software will become increasingly being used for networks. And the next thing which I just wanted to tell you, Prem, is that since you talked about evolution over the next 5 years, I also wanted to highlight the opportunity that is available for the telecom providers to really leverage the power of IoT to add more revenue to their business. Number one, being that the number of IoT connections will actually increase in the next 5 years. I just wanted to share some insights from a report from a well-known research and consulting firm called Transformer Insights. And I just wanted to pick up or share with you some data points.
Yes.
Last year, we had about 16 billion IoT connections, and
Mm.
this report by 2033, we'll touch about 40 billion. And these are five
Okay.
IoT connections. These are not PCs or laptops. Number
Mhm.
two, last year we had 1.9 billion cellular connections. That will hit about 7.5 billion in 2033. And third
Okay.
is 5G, 5G massive machine type communications. 5G will also see significant growth over the next few years. So overall, from a evolution perspective, we're going to see a lot more software-defined networks, a lot more AI being fused into networks. And one thing which is very clear is that we're going to see this whole amalgamation of IoT and AI. So we're going to use the word called AIoT because there's no point in generating all the data, and if you're not able to use AI to really get the insights and help make right decisions, right? So a very clear trend that will play out over the next 5 years is AI and IoT kind of converging, and it'll be more
Mhm.
like AIoT services, Prem. So that's my response to your question.
Sir, with the current key challenges, telecom companies, how do you see them adopting and integrating IoT solutions to their existing infrastructures?
Right. So I'll just give you some examples of how IoT is being used within communication service providers, and I'll give you some examples from the company that I worked earlier,
Okay.
AT&T, and this is true for many operators. Also have very similar use cases. So I'll just
Okay.
pick up a few of them. One is most operators have a fleet of vehicles which they manage, which are carrying the technicians to sites to install devices and to lay fiber and so on, or install towers. So, for example, AT&T had about until 2 years back 60,000 vehicles, and a fleet management application to manage the fleet. So there they're using telematic devices which are IoT powered, connecting to the cloud to optimize routes so that the vehicles take the shortest possible route, monitoring the driver behavior, monitoring fuel consumption, and so on. So that's one
Okay.
example of how IoT is being used to monitor fleets. Number
Hmm.
two, many of the large buildings they're using IoT for optimizing energy. So a lot of the large buildings have heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And the huge
Okay.
scope to optimize air conditioning in large buildings. And AT&T, after having used IoT-based solutions, saw a significant reduction in their energy spend, having used an IoT-based building management service or a system. That's
Hmm.
number two. Third is some of the service providers have data centers, and many of these data centers need to be monitored very closely. They need a lot of cooling and all that. So to monitor the temperature of all the servers which are there in data centers. So that's another example where they can use. Many of them are using diesel generators for backup for power. So to monitor these diesel generators in real time to find out whether the generators are run out of diesel or not. So that can be done in real time. So that's another example. And a lot of the towers have a lot of equipment. So many of them are to be remotely monitored. And using IoT, they'll be able to remotely troubleshoot and solve those issues. So broadly, these are some of the examples where IoT is being used by the telecommunication service providers. Prem.
Sunil, I think I have a misconception about IoT in general or telecommunications. What I always used to recall or think is when you spoke about fleet management, I was surprised, actually speaking, right? Why a telecom company is running a fleet, right? So
Yeah.
I didn't go in that language or I didn't have that in thought because technicians have to be moved to locations where there are problems and those vehicles have to be tracked on what the equipment they are carrying. This was never in my mind because telecom means it's only telecom. So we never, my view was that I don't know. See, we never think about beyond that is what I feel, and IoT being used there from a telecom provider is very nice. This is a great misconception that I've been having. Thanks for clearing that. And again, you said,
Even e-bikes, even e-bikes, see, many of them have, some of them also use two-wheelers. So, for example, some of
yeah,
the telecom providers are wanting to move to electric vehicles, and
electric
many of them
vehicle.
have. For example, I'll give you the example of BT, British Telecom in UK. There are a lot
Okay.
of two-wheeler EVs which are moving around, going to customer sites, and those are all monitored through IoT. The batteries are monitored through IoT, location, and so on. So. This is a very common use case for the telecom providers to manage a fleet of either four wheelers, vans or even two-wheelers, Prem.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you
Yes.
really look at, I missed that point beyond a telecom service provider. Okay, I always, thanks for clearing me that doubt for me. I don't know. Okay, can you share some successful implementations of IoT in telecom sector and have significantly improved the operations or customer experience?
Right. So I just gave you some examples of. I'll give again. I'll elaborate on this example for where ATT used IoT solution to monitor their buildings and all that.
Yeah.
So after they have implemented that solution, they started to see significant reduction in their energy bills, almost a 30 to 40% reduction in their energy bills because pretty much every asset.
Hmm.
HVAC system were all sensorized, and by getting the data, by able to optimize the energy, significant savings.
Yeah.
That's one. I also wanted to give you an example of how with the in partnership with the company called Emerson,
Hmm.
how AT&T worked with them to solve a problem which we are all facing today: food waste. Okay, so
Hmm.
so much of food is being wasted. A lot of the food waste from restaurants, from hotels, and even from company campuses. A lot of the food waste actually goes into a landfill, and when you send all this food waste to a landfill, it generates greenhouse gases. Methane is very, very potent, very, very bad greenhouse gas.
Okay.
So this is a very common challenge. And here I just wanted to highlight how AT&T in partnership with this company called Emerson worked together to build a solution where all the food waste is actually sent to one kind of a tank, which is
Hmm.
IoT enabled, where you can monitor the fill levels because the food waste is converted into one kind of a slurry, uh,
Hmm.
and the slurry fill levels are monitored. And when the moment the tank reaches its capacity, the slurry is sent
Hmm.
to another process, it's sent to another another machine where they use a thing called anaerobic digestion, which converts that slurry into biofuel, and the
Okay.
biofuel is an alternate form of energy. And by doing this, they prevented some millions of tons of food waste from going into the landfills. And secondly, most importantly, it was also ensuring that it prevented significant amount of CO2 from being emitted into the atmosphere. So I just wanted to give you this example of how the power of IoT has been leveraged for a very, very, very serious issue in terms of handling food waste. Uh, that's within the telecom industry. But otherwise, if you look at how the telecom industry has worked with other companies to help them improve their revenues or reduce the cost, I just wanted to give you the example of how, again, this is an example in India, which all of you all can relate to. You talked
Yeah.
about trying to improve revenues, increase customer experience. So I'll give you this example because this is an example of an industry, of a company which is leveraging the power of IoT, and they're using connectivity networks from Indian providers. So
Okay.
there is a brand called Live Pure, Prem. Live Pure is a brand which is well known in the water purifier market. They compete against Kent, they compete against Unilever water purifiers. And as
Okay.
you know, if somebody wants to buy a water purifier, they either have to go to a store and buy it, or they can buy it through an e-commerce site, go
Okay.
to a marketplace and buy it. And here was this company, Live Pure. By the way, this brand is actually endorsed by the great Sachin Tendulkar. So Live Pure,
Hmm.
what they wanted to do is they wanted to innovate around the business model. So instead of selling the water purifier outright to a customer, they give you the water purifier for free. So you and I get it for free. We don't pay any installation cost. That water purifier has got a sensor in it which will measure the volume of water, how much water you
Okay.
consume. And it is also monitoring the overall health of the water purifier. How is the filter performing? How is the power supply working? And so on.
Okay.
So overall health of the water purifier is monitored. And what happens is because it's got a volume sensor, it will measure the volume of water that is being consumed. So I have an
Hmm.
app in which I can track how many liters of water I consume, and I only pay based on how much of water that I'm consuming. That's why they call it water as a service. Very similar like cloud, where you only pay based on compute and storage. So this was a water as a service model, and Lipure have actually seen the benefit because after they have started offering the service, it was a clear differentiator for them. They've seen the
Hmm.
revenue grow significantly. Last quarter, I think they grew about 70% compared to the previous quarter by offering something like this. And talking of customer experience, now because they're monitoring the water purifier real time, even before you and I know that there's a problem, they will tell you that there could be a potential problem, and they will alert you and they'll tell you that they're sending a technician to your home to fix that problem before you even know. So this is taking customer experience to a new level. So I just wanted to give you this example. There are enough and more such examples, but I just wanted to highlight this example of how using IoT, and of course we need very good telecom networks for that, because data is constantly being sent to the cloud. How a company was able to innovate around their business models and offer a
Hmm.
service where they started to see customers, experience improve. Prem.
Sir, with proliferation of IoT devices, how do we ensure robust security measures to protect data and privacy? Now, you rightly said that we will bring every device is connected and it's sending data, right? Now, with the laws coming in and very strict on privacy laws and stuff that is happening, with our own privacy law coming on DPDP, right? How do you see IoT devices on the security and privacy side, sir?
So very, very important question, a very valid question, Prem, because as I mentioned, 40 billion connections in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Um, and today, the weakest link in the chain is the device, right?
Yeah.
Because if the IoT device is compromised, then the hacker can actually get into the network and create a lot of damage. And there
Yeah.
are enough and more examples of how hackers or the bad guys were able to attack operational technology assets, OT assets
Yeah.
connected to internet, and the impact that it had. Just a simple example I wanted to share. About 7 8 years back, in Las Vegas, there's a casino there, and that
Mm.
casino had a fish tank, and
Okay.
they were using a temperature sensor to monitor the temperature of the water, because the temperature has to be maintained at a level in order for the fish to survive and live there. And what
Okay.
happened is that the temperature sensor was connected through IoT, and
Mm.
the hacker was able to compromise that sensor and was able
Mm.
to use that as a gateway to get into the internal IT systems, and was able to extract significant amount of data, a lot of the customer data, including their phone number, email ID, social security number. A lot of that the hacker was able to extract. So even an ordinary fish tank is not spared, and there are enough
Yeah.
examples of other manufacturers who had their assets being compromised through cyber attacks. So coming to the question again, uh, the device is going to be a very, very important aspect. We need to look at security, and one has to look at cyber security very holistically for IoT. Right? So one
Mm.
has to look at device security. Second, one has to look at network security. Third, one has to look at application security, application and data security. So
Yeah.
for the device security, one very important principle that everyone should follow, device manufacturers should follow, is security by design principle. Security cannot be thought of as an afterthought. It can't be bolted on. It has to be designed from the scratch. So the device has to be built with security by design principles. And even if it's okay if the cost goes up, but it's extremely important to build a device. So whether it's a software security or even a hardware security, a chip which is there inside can be encrypted. A secure, trusted platform module in the gateway is very much needed. And you'd heard of this concept called root of trust. So that root
Yeah.
of trust is actually built into the silicon, so that
Mm.
all the secure operations are performed from there, right? So this root of trust is going to be very, very important. So the other important thing is the device has to be certified. There are bodies
Yeah.
which do certification. So
Device
in India,
certificate.
it's not mandatory for devices to be certified, but there are countries where it is mandatory for the devices, IoT devices which are using cellular SIMs, to be certified. And there are enough and more instances where IoT devices have been sent on field and the default password has not been changed, and that is allowing
Mm.
the hacker to compromise. So those are you know very common problems. So fundamentally, you have to make sure that there are enough access controls in place. Only those who have the right access would identity rather connecting to the device. Second is network security. So all the data which is going on the network, that has to be encrypted. So, like how you have a VPN through which you can connect to a tunnel and connect to a corporate network. In cellular parlance, we use what is called APN, access point name. It's like a
Access.
VPN through cellular. So all the data goes through a tunnel. So you can secure a network. And the cellular networks, which are based on 3GPP standard, third generation partnership program, they
Mm.
are very secure because they have been evolved over so many years. A lot of work has gone in developing standards, including security. So they are a lot more secure compared to say Wi-Fi, or compared to non-3GPP based networks like LoRaWAN. So networks are secure. Third is that you got to secure your data and applications if it's on-prem or on the cloud. And there you have to use a combination of tools. So you have to use data loss prevention, you have web security gateways, then you have to use the managed intrusion detection, DDoS solutions, right? So combination of
Yeah.
tools has to be used to protect all your data and applications. Prem. So this is what my answer would be to your question related to device security.
I get your point where we should talk about privacy when we are talking about privacy. There is a concept that you told like privacy by design, by privacy by default. Now I will term it little different when it comes to your point of view. Security by design and security by default is what we should look at. IoT devices is what you are trying or informing us, and the vendors who are working on these device manufacturing should embed by default the security features given by the governing bodies, right? So the laws also have certain requirements that are there for the IoT devices to function. Great insight on that, sir. Then what would you say on 5G technology impacting the landscape of IoT, particularly when you look at scalability and connectivity? Now, we are talking about 6G also coming in. So, how does the impact happen if I am moving to 5G? What is that I have to do for 6G? How do I look at having the scalability and interoperability looked at while we move from the traditional thing to the 5G technology?
Sure, Prem. So 5G will definitely be a big enabler, or it can really propel IoT adoption. And I
Hmm.
just first wanted to share with you what are the key characteristics of 5G network or a technology, and compare it to the previous generations.
Yeah,
If you just look at the 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 4G is still being used today.
yeah.
All these cellular technologies, we are seeing how speeds have increased, network speeds have increased, correct? Faster
Hmm.
data speeds, right? From one generation to the next. Now, 5G is just not about faster data speeds. 5G is promising to change the user experience. And there are three or four important characteristics that I wanted to highlight about 5G.
Hmm.
Number one being that the latency on 5G is very, very low. So your latency is anywhere between 1 millisecond to 10 milliseconds, unlike 4G and previous generations where the latency is much higher. So the kind of applications that are possible is so different now. One can even do remote surgery, and this has actually happened in China on a
Yeah,
5G
I
network.
think I heard that pointer,
Yes,
Sunil, where an operation is done from a remote place, and the operation is done using a robot. So it is not a human that was there guiding it. It was remotely done. I don't remember which country it
it
was.
actually happened in China. Yeah, so
Okay.
so the latency is very, very low. Number
Hmm.
two, uh, the availability, 5G availability. So you're talking about the 99.99999, 99.59 availability, extremely reliable network. That's number two.
Hmm.
Uh, Third is the speed frame. You're talking about speeds of 400 megabits per second and higher. If you are actually using a 5G network,
Hmm.
uh, most of the phones today support 5G. So when you do
Yeah.
a speed test, you can check your speed. It will be anywhere from 200, 300, 400, or even more, depending upon the frequency band, of course. In India, we're using the mid-band spectrum, 3.3 to
Yeah.
3.6 gigahertz. But
Right.
speeds are much faster compared to 4G. And the next important thing, and this is where the IoT thing will come, is connection density. That's why we call it massive IoT, where in a 1 million, in a 1 square kilometer radius, you can actually have 1 million devices in a one
Hmm.
square kilometer radius. So very high connection density. And this is where it will really trigger high IoT adoption, because in a small radius, in a small area, you can have thousands of assets connected to a 5G network, and all of them will work well, right? So 5G will definitely give you, that performance that was not possible with the earlier generations, and definitely will propel IoT growth. And we already started to see some companies looking at using 5G in factories to connect all their machines. In India, we find a few automotive companies which are leveraging private 5G networks, connecting to
Yes.
all the assets, and sending all the machine data to the cloud. We also have seen how in a large factory example in the Europe, BMW, all the vehicles, all the material handling equipment, all the forklifts which are there in the factory are all connected through 5G. They're able to remotely monitor it. So 5G definitely is going to be a growth. It will
I
propel the
think
growth of.
when I think even when Adani announced that he's getting into telecom, I think that was one thing that he said is he would have a private network to connect its factories and see how it is what I understand. I read somewhere how much of true. I don't have the exact
That's in the
article
port
detail.
actually.
Yeah.
They wanted to use it to connect their port. They have a big port in
Yeah.
Gujarat. So they
Hmm.
want, and port a very good example where you can leverage the power of 5G. Because if
Yeah.
you, I had a chance to be to a port 7 years back. I had a chance to be to the Mundra port of same Adani Group. I went there and
Okay.
did a survey. And
Uh-huh.
port, very large port. There are so many assets. There are tugs, there are containers, there are vehicles which are moving. So many different assets
Crane,
constantly
many people,
monitored.
the equipment. Yeah. Right. So with
Right.
this, now that we were talking about a million devices and stuff, and we are talking about even the cloud adoption, right? Now with IoT being enabled, cloud costs would shoot up if I have 1,000 devices which I am connecting to a cloud. What do you think on edge computing will play a role in enhancing IoT capabilities with telecom communication networks?
Yeah, again, a very important question, Prem. Yes, so we started to see some examples where some companies are looking to leverage the power of edge connectivity,
Yeah.
because you're placing the edge device closer to where the data is getting generated from. And there are some
Yes.
examples, where, for example, in a manufacturing environment, it's a good use case where if you have a
Hmm.
situation where you're acquiring data from a machine, and that machine is very very expensive, and it's in an environment where even a 1 minute or even a less than 1 minute downtime of that machine can impact production and also impact the safety of people. You can't be
Hmm.
expecting the data to go to cloud to be processed and action to be taken. So an
Hmm.
example like that, if you want any event to be reported very quickly, you have an edge device which will process all the data, and then you
Hmm.
can do all the control using the edge, so that you don't have to every time send data to the cloud, right? So that's one example. Or even in the case of a connected car, when you have especially if you're having a driverless car, not in India,
Hmm.
these autonomous cars.
Yeah.
There are some places where they are trying out the use of these driverless cars. Again,
Right.
you need to have an edge device on the car to process all the data, because it has to tell you exactly if there's an obstacle and for you the car to maneuver around. Right? You can't be sending data to cloud and for it to be
Hmm.
processed and then an action to be taken. Right? So that's another example where you can actually use. So whenever you have an application where you need to respond very quickly to any event, and when the
Hmm.
alert gets generated, the ability to respond very quickly, edge solution will be the right solution. So
Okay.
IoT with edge, and of course it has to be hybrid also, Prem, because uh, you still need some of the data to go to the cloud for further processing.
Hmm.
So it got to be hybrid architecture that will prevail in the future. And one also has to take into consideration the cost aspect, Prem, because um, if you're going to use an edge solution, then you'll need to factor the cost involved, because an edge device would have to have a lot more compute, a lot more
Hmm.
storage. And now they're also
Yes.
talking about running machine learning and AI machine learning on the edge, right? So that
Yeah.
you can take all the inferences quickly and take action. So the moment you build a lot more compute and storage on the edge, then the cost of
Hmm.
that device goes up. So one has to
Yes.
look at the use case. One also has to look at the cost, how much it will cost to build the edge, and also has to look at if you're sending a lot more data to the cloud, and if the cloud computing costs are more, that also has to be factored. So one has to look at it very balanced approach. It has to be a hybrid architecture that will be the best suited for an enterprise. It cannot be edge or cloud. It has to be
Hmm.
both. Uh,
Yeah. It's a
and
mix. Mix is what we are talking about.
yeah.
With telecom, what are the risks that are associated with IoT device adoption in telecom, and how do we mitigate them?
See, I would say when, especially when you have a telecom company, see, within the telecom industry, if you have a number of IoT devices installed across, right? They call
Mm,
it device estate, the device estate, like how you use the word real estate. We use the
mm,
word device estate, hundreds and thousands of devices spread across, right?
right, right.
So then when you have to manage so many devices, it becomes a challenge to manage a
Mm,
big estate of devices. And,
right.
because what happens is there are times when you have to constantly upgrade the firmware of the device. For example, if there are some new vulnerabilities that have been unearthed, you might
Mm,
have to do an over-the-air update, OTA they
mm,
call it. So you'll have to do an over-the-air update and make the necessary changes in the firmware of the device. Now there are times when some of these devices are in locations where connectivity is very poor, and it may
mm.
not, the updates may not happen. And if that doesn't happen, then the device might malfunction.
Okay.
So one has to be, has to watch out for that. How do you monitor such devices? How do you make sure that the device is always secure? And also, very importantly, you have to make sure that many of these devices are architected in such a way that you have a gateway separate and the sensors separately. And the sensors, you'll have to calibrate the sensors because sensors are giving readings about physical attributes of a device. So you'll have to
Mm,
make sure that these sensors are also performing well and giving you accurate readings. So that might need to call for calibration of these sensors, which might be difficult if it is in a production environment. So we'll have to find some downtime where you can do some calibration. So these are practical challenges, and then network issues also. Because see, I've practically seen, given my so many years of experience, that especially sometimes in basements when you have IoT devices, you don't have data coming out, and then trying to figure out how do you address the connectivity issue. So those are some practical challenges. Then
mm.
we also have challenges when you also have sometimes this whole fragmented ecosystem. Devices are using multiple protocols to send data to cloud. It's a very fragmented
Okay.
ecosystem, and there might be some devices which might use a non-standard protocol to send, and then you will have to use some device adapter to convert non-standard to standard. So everybody keeps using the word device to cloud integration, and it has to be seamless. You say it's easier said than done. There's a lot of complexity there, and that's why you need to really figure out how you can build a platform, how you can build a solution where there's a seamless device to cloud integration, so that for the user it has to be very easy. It should be easily usable. So simplicity in terms of using solutions. You don't want to build very complex solutions. So broadly, these are the challenges, Prem.
Sir, with so much of data getting generated with these devices, how can businesses leverage this data and bring up innovation, and which can also drive the business innovation with insights, actionable insights, to be very precise?
Yeah, so AI is going to be. We are living in the AI era. I mean, the next 7 years we are going to see adoption picking up. In fact, already picked up, but it will
Yeah,
pick up even more going forward. So analytics and AI, yes, that will be the key aspect in any solution. IoT is just a small piece in the whole puzzle. IoT is
yeah,
just sensorizing the physical world, getting the data, and then you're getting the data. You're ingesting it into an IoT platform. You're visualizing the data. And then the real thing is integrating with the backend. And then, of course, you're going to use AI and machine learning to get those insights and make the right decisions. So,
yeah,
just take two or three industries. So, Prem, manufacturers today are leveraging the power of AI to help in predictive maintenance of machines. Uh, Machines today,
yeah,
when machines go down in a factory. And again, I'll talk from my own experience because I have done assessments of manufacturing companies. I'm paneled as a consultant with Frost and Sullivan, and I do Industry 4.0
Mm.
assessments or digital readiness assessments for manufacturers. So I've actually been to
Okay.
factories and I've seen some of those practical challenges. So many times machines going down has impact on production, and production is down. Obviously, you can't produce. It has an impact on customer experience. So how do you ensure that
Mm.
you're able to ensure high uptime of machines, right? So to be able to predict when a machine might fail or any part in that machine might fail, that's where an AI and analytics come, because unplanned downtime causes almost a 50 billion loss to the industry. So use of IoT, AI, analytics all put together, and cloud, of course, definitely can reduce and ensure that machines are always operating at high uptime. So predictive maintenance. Second important thing is asset optimization, Prem, because that's one of the biggest use case for IoT and AI. You want to ensure that any industry, whether it is a manufacturer or construction industry, they spend a lot on capex to buy assets, and you want to
Yes.
maximize the use of assets. Some of them are in millions of dollars. They don't want to be seeing assets just lying idle, right? You want to make sure that the assets are effectively utilized, to track the location of it, to see how much of the time it is idle, right? So a lot of the data that is getting generated, and you are able to use the data to see to what extent that asset is getting utilized. And if you find that the asset is not being utilized properly in a particular area, you can redeploy it in somewhere else, right? So all those decisions that you can take, using AI. Healthcare, of course, today you can use AI and IoT to make sure that you're able to predict what are your potential health challenges, smart
Yeah.
wearable data to cloud, health
Yes.
stored. Again, a good example of IoT being used. Retail, today you're getting a lot more analytics to be able to give you more customized recommendation in terms of what you should buy. So that's another
Particular
example.
products which you search online and
Yeah, enough and more examples, Prem, where IoT and AI together can really create a lot of impact and really add value to a manufacturer or to a healthcare provider or to a retailer, to a fleet provider.
now, you touched upon an important point of large devices and cost aspects, right? Now, in what ways, or how the IoT contribute to sustainable efforts within telecom sector, such as energy efficiency, consumption, and optimization of resource allocation?
Yeah, so when you talk about IoT use case and sustainability, I want to give you an example, okay? And that will illustrate my point. Now,
Hmm.
the Changi Airport in Singapore. Changi
Yeah.
Airport is one of the biggest airports in Asia.
Hmm.
Okay, one of the biggest airports in Asia, and Changi Airport has got 280 gates, right? In India, most of the airports would have about 50 to 60 gates, right? Not
Hmm.
more than that.
Hmm.
Shanghai, because it's
Yeah.
one of the biggest, it's got about 280 gates, and all those gates are closed gates. Unlike in India, where the gates are open, no? You can just go from one gate to the other.
Hmm.
Most of the gates are closed gates, and
Okay.
here, Shanghai Airport, there, what was happening is that even if, and even after a flight has taken off, that gate
Hmm.
air conditioning was still on, lighting was still on.
Okay.
Okay, so the energy spend was very very high, and
Hmm.
there's a company in Bangalore. I can't name that company, but they actually worked on a solution where they were
Hmm.
taking data from building management system. They were getting data from the flight information and display system, FIDS it's called. Taking that data,
Hmm.
taking data from the building management system, correlating with external weather conditions, and actually
Hmm.
basis flight arrival and departure, they were regulating the air conditioning and lighting. Okay, so they
Hmm.
were able
Hmm.
to regulate the air conditioning of lighting of 280 gates. And this is a very good example of IoT and AI and analytics being used, because after they started to use the solution, they know exactly when is the right time to turn the lights, when is the right,
Hmm.
everything is automated. Nothing is physically done. So right
Yeah.
time, before 1 hour before the flight departure, lights are turned on, air conditioning is on. And the flight departs, again, there's a time interval between a departure and the next, arrival. Again, it switches off. So they started to see
Hmm.
significant impact in terms of energy being lowered. So that is an example. And if you just look at buildings today, Prem, um, all the current buildings that are there, real estate industry contributes significantly to the
Yeah.
energy demand. A lot of energy is being used just on heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Airports is an example, but there are so many tech parks, so many large campuses, buildings, uh, huge significant saving that is possible by leveraging IoT to reduce your energy spend. Because you can,
Yeah.
very important thing, Prem, to understand is to ensure that adding context to data. It is just not enough getting temperature readings from AC. One also has to correlate it with external weather conditions, right? Depending on external weather conditions, you can regulate your air conditioning. If the outside temperature is 45, 46, your AC obviously will run at 21, 22. If external weather is outside temperature is 25, 30, you don't need to set your AC at such low levels, right? So based on external weather conditions, based on occupancy level in the room, so if there are 10 people, then obviously you want higher cooling. If there are one or two people, their cooling, doesn't need to be high. So by able to correlate data coming from multiple sources, you're able to optimize and regulate, and that is a big advantage. So energy, significant use of IoT in optimizing energy, and even in factories, a
Mm.
lot of the factory use compressors, boilers, which generate steam, which generates compressed air. A lot of utilities see energy wastage, and many of them have compressors which have a lot of rotary equipment. A small bearing fault in a compressor might cause an energy spike. The ability to
Yes.
detect a fault early and using IoT, you can do that, and you can lower your energy spend. So again, there are a lot of examples where you can really optimize use of energy using IoT, Prem.
We were working when in my earlier organization days. We were working in a queue management system. I cannot name the customer, where we were told to fix in IP cameras and other devices where it can monitor the people standing in that queue system,
Right.
and how how much time if I punch in, or my time for entry is and what would be my exit time that was to be predicted. We built a solution around it, and we were ready to do, but things turned out the other way. But the solution what we devised was, if I log in, or my time to get into the queue is at 2 o'clock, my queue exit time would be at 4 o'clock. So we were able to predict based on the number of people who have gotten. And I recently went to Dharmasthala, enter, where I enter means there is a count saying that you are the 600th person entering the queue. Okay, that kind of a device on the security check device, it showed me saying that you are the 620th or something is what I was, the pilgrimage entry queue where I started. And they were able to predict how many people are coming to the temple. So these are some of
Okay.
the IoT things that are getting implemented in real time. Now you mentioned a very important point where you said energy efficiency at home or at offices. If there are people who are in the conference room with two people, you don't need to have the AC at 2018 or 19. It can
Right.
reduce and see that you get sufficient cooling. When there are more people, the AC automatically adjusts with the thermostat setting based on the number of people around. So those are some of the use cases which I can correlate now when we are talking on these pointers.
Right.
How do we see uh, telecom providers leverage and adopt these technologies for better infrastructure?
Yeah, so if you just look at the telecom provider, just look at cellular infrastructure. Cellular infrastructure, you have a lot of towers that are built, sorry, and then a lot of equipment that is there, which is the transmission equipment. So significant amount of infrastructure that is laid along with the towers.
Yeah.
And those are remotely monitored using IoT.
Hmm.
So so if you're able to remotely monitor that in real time and without having to send someone physically to a site for repairs, it saves a lot of time, improves productivity, reduces downtime. So that's one example. And then a lot of the fiber that is laid underground today, if you're able to monitor these fiber networks in real time, and there are also fiber transmission equipment which is there. So through IoT, you can really monitor them and you'll know exactly when this the equipment needs to be serviced, or if there's a problem, trying to troubleshoot that early. So that's another example. A lot of the data centers, some of the telecom providers have data centers, a lot of servers and storage, the entire infrastructure is there. So monitoring that entire power system there, optimizing energy there, again, a good example of optimizing of energy, and making sure that remotely they're able to manage this entire infrastructure through IoT to prevent
mm,
any downtime. Right? If you're able to remotely monitor it without having to have physical presence, again, it's saving of cost, saving of productivity and all that stuff, so higher productivity and all that. So from an infra perspective, these are areas where definitely the telecom providers can leverage the power of IoT to make sure that they are able to maintain the uptime of all the infrastructure. That is very, very critical because at the end of the day, Prem, connectivity is going to be a big aspect of this. There was a survey done by one research company called Eclipse Foundation, and they said
mm,
that if you want to design an IoT solution, which is the biggest consideration for an enterprise, because IoT solution encompasses so many things. No, you have your IoT device, you have your network, you have cloud. So many components go into making an IoT solution. So, which is the number one consideration when you want to build an IoT solution? And 48% of those people who did that survey said connectivity is important, right? So, telecom providers have to make sure that they're providing very high uptime on the networks, and to ensure high uptime of networks, that infrastructure which is there to manage and to provide that has to be maintained properly, and IoT will is playing a big part there to make sure that the infrastructure is maintained and monitored well, to ensure that uptime of networks are maintained at a very high level. Prem.
Now, with smart cities coming in, sir, wherever we see, we have the connectivity part that is being discussed as part of smart cities. Now, how do we envisage or envision the future of IoT powered smart cities that can uh, their reliance on telecommunication infrastructure? How do we look at that?
So a lot of examples where you can use IoT and of course a combination of technologies to make sure that our cities are smarter. Even in India,
Hmm.
the Smart City Commission was launched way back in 2015, and there are many cities which have implemented some projects. So
Yes.
simple examples: traffic light management, to monitor pockets or zones where traffic is very high, and to make sure that decisions can be made to reroute traffic to other areas. So, intelligent traffic
Hmm.
management is one example. Air quality monitoring, especially with pollution being so high, using air quality sensors powered by IoT, you can monitor pollution levels and and you can take certain decisions that there are certain pockets which has very high pollution, and then maybe the traffic there is a little more, a lot of construction activity happening in that place that is causing the pollution to go up. So you can actually take those decisions to make sure that air quality monitoring can be done, and pollution can come down. Street light monitoring, many times you'll find that street lights in the morning, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, the lights are on, and so much of energy wastage, right? So you can have smart street lights where you can actually monitor the street lights, adjust the lighting, the dimness. You can dim the street lights, increase the intensity. So all that is possible. Video surveillance, Prem, all the CCTV cameras, and a CCTV is nothing but a sensor, right? You're capturing
Yeah.
images and sending it to the cloud. So
Hmm.
now you have high resolution video cameras, which
Yes.
are, one is of course detecting a crime, so traffic violations is one example, monitoring people count at certain places, so video surveillance.
Hmm.
Again, thanks to 5G, you can send high quality video to a video server to do processing. So that's another example. Then many municipal corporations are using IoT for monitoring fill levels of waste bins. So there are certain societies where you kept these IoT enabled waste bins where you're monitoring the fill levels, how much of waste is there in that. Then once the bins are filled with waste up to 100%, then you make sure that the alerts are going to the municipal authorities so that they can send somebody with a pickup truck to clear the garbage, right? So these are some areas where definitely, and even smart parking also, Prem. Parking, there are smart parking solutions which are
Yeah.
available where, and you and I have encountered problems when we'll be circling around for parking place, we don't get one. How much of
Right.
fuel we're burning, right? We are wasting time and we are burning fuel. What if you have an app which will tell you that, hey, there's a particular parking slot here, and you go straight to that? Saves time, and it also you consume less fuel. And today there are parking solutions, smart parking solutions are available where you can really optimize the amount of fuel and also saves you time, right? So broadly, these are some examples which I wanted to share. Even public buildings, today you can have IoT to monitor energy, and so broadly these are examples, Prem, from a smart city perspective.
Yeah. So coming back to smart solutions, you are talking about solutions on parking, right? So parking is one thing that has been implemented in almost all the parking slots of malls, is what I see. And there's a indication saying that this floor, so many cars are slots
Yeah.
are available for parking. Some are not there, so there's a red light which is coming up. So those are pointers that I think IoT devices are sending data to those display boards. Coming
Yeah, but
back to, yeah, yes,
no, I
yes,
think we have to go beyond that. See, one is just you only know how many slots are available, but you
mm,
still have to find your slot. You don't know where to go and park. So
right,
now there are solutions where you can have parking sensors which are under the ground, which will
okay,
monitor, and alert you that there's a particular slot available. So there
okay,
are places where they use these parking sensors which are embedded in the earth, which will tell
mm,
you of a free slot. And that is what is needed because many of these malls will only tell you how many slots are available, but will not tell you where exactly to go and park.
okay, okay. But sir, coming back on to our this one, what are the regulatory considerations should telecom companies keep in mind while deploying IoT solutions, especially keeping compliance and data privacy in mind?
Yeah, again, a very important question, Prem. So, um, see, IoT, if you just look at IoT, and when you have global deployments of
Mm,
IoT, you could have a manufacturer who has factories all over the world, and the telecom providers who might be giving a global solution. Okay,
right. Yeah.
and a lot of these solutions are using cellular SIMs. The
Mm,
devices have a SIM inside and sending data to the cloud. Uh, Now, there are certain countries where they allow what is called permanent roaming. So, for example, I'll just
mm,
give an example of an automotive company. Say you have a large brand like BMW, and they have
okay.
vehicles in multiple countries: US, Europe, India, China, Japan.
Mm,
BMW signs up with the telecom operator and asks the telecom operator to put their SIM in the telematic device which is connected inside the vehicle.
okay.
That service provider have to ensure that in the US and Europe they have certain guidelines.
Mm,
There is no challenge in terms of issues around roaming. So the device can just be plugged in and connect to the network, and you can monitor the vehicle. But in a country like China, you cannot have a SIM card from an outside operator. So, if, say, example, a British Telecom or
mm,
any other foreign operator wants to provide a service in China, they have to use
mhm,
a SIM which connect. It has to be localized. It has to connect to the local operator's network, and hence that
okay.
SIM has to have a profile which is connected to the local operator, and
Okay.
hence because the permanent roaming is not allowed in China, data has to be localized within China. So one has to be
Mm,
cognizant of the regulations in China. Then Brazil today doesn't allow permanent roaming. So if I want to have a SIM card and put it in a device and installed in a vehicle in Brazil, they don't allow permanent roaming. So they allow you. You'll have to again use a local operator SIM card there. In India, they do allow it, but you need to get approvals for that, right?
okay.
So one has to be cognizant of the regulations that are that would allow you permanent roaming or doesn't allow permanent roaming. That's one.
Okay.
Second thing is also localization of data. For example, in China, your
Mm,
location data also cannot be outside of China. Supposing you are monitoring a fleet of vehicles in China, all the location data cannot be outside of China. It has to be within China.
China. Yeah. Yeah.
There are some countries where they don't bother whether your location data is in some other country or not. So one has
Now,
to be, yeah,
now location data is becoming crucial with privacy laws coming into picture, right? So,
yes, absolutely. So India,
yeah,
yeah,
health has their own set of rules. GDPR has
yeah,
their own, then CCPA has their own set of rules. Now with India coming up with their set of rules, you have
yeah.
data
The
privacy rules.
DP, the DPDP Act, the
DPDP
Digital
Act
Personal
is
Data
going to
Protection
be
Act,
very,
is,
and the fines are very hefty, and
yeah.
it can kill the organization itself. Those are the fines kind of thing that are going through with this piracy laws. With that, how important is a collaboration between telecom providers and the IoT device manufacturers, driving innovation in addressing industry challenges?
Again, a very good question. I'll give you my own example, my own personal experience. When I was in AT&T,
Hmm.
uh, and I was heading the IoT business for India and ASEAN
Okay.
region, and
Okay.
AT&T's strength was in connectivity, so providing IoT connectivity to all large corporates, enterprises. AT&T
Okay.
never used to make devices. IoT
Hmm.
devices are not something which AT&T makes, and neither the telecom, other telecom providers, none of them make IoT devices. So we used to
Okay.
partner with companies who make IoT devices.
Hmm.
So some of them are startups. So like I used to partner with one Hyderabad-based startup. I can't name that company, but we
Hmm.
partnered with that Hyderabad-based startup which makes IoT devices, and we used to collaborate very closely with them because the device which they make used to use our SIM and they used to deploy it in their customer location. So we used to work very closely to make sure there's very
Hmm.
seamless integration possible. So that there's no issues with related to connectivity challenges and all that stuff. So very close collaboration, and even to
Hmm.
the extent frame where we actually work with that hardware provider, that IoT hardware provider, the startup. We actually
Hmm.
took him and to our foundry, our lab in the US. We took him there
Okay.
and we spent some time there understanding how we can work together. And we looked at various use cases where we can actually co-create solutions. So it is not just building the solution for a customer, but even trying
Hmm.
to see how we can partner with the hardware partner, with the customer to co-create solutions, right? So that is taking the relationship to the next level. So I just gave you that example of how a telecom provider can really partner very closely with the device manufacturer and really kind of co-create solutions for customers, right? So extremely important for the device providers and the telecom providers to really have a very close coordination, very close collaboration to be able to provide very cost-effective and reliable solutions to enterprise customers. Prem.
Sir, as a CEO of a telecommunication company, which you are talking about, which is an independent business that you are having, what advice do you see for aspiring leaders who can move and navigate complexities of IoT integration and digital transformation in the industries?
Yeah, so just one correction. So I'm right now not the CEO of a telecom company. I'm an independent digital tech consultant. But
Independent business.
to answer your question, I think what is very, very important to frame is that from an IoT perspective, one has to really figure out what is the problem statement they're trying to solve. Identifying the right use case is going to be very critical. Once you
Hmm.
identify the right use case, you have to be very clear in terms of what will be the outcome that you want to achieve, right? Because no point in deploying IoT just because others are using it. If you have a problem, if you have a certain KPI, key performance indicator, that this is my reason why I'm going to implement IoT, and I want that return on investment to come within 1 year, 2 years, that is
Hmm.
very, very critical. So having the right use case, uh, and then making sure that you identify the real KPIs. And third and most important thing is to start small. Start with a small project, do a small POC, and once you start seeing success, once you start seeing the impact, slowly scale that POC, move that POC to production. And
Okay.
a very simple mantra, Prem, in IoT world, it is start small, think big, think of the bigger picture, and you got to scale fast. You have to scale fast because the moment you start scaling, you do say if a company has got 100 factories, if they implemented IoT in one factory or five factories, they get certain value. But the moment they start taking that to all the 100 factories, the value that they get will be much, much higher. Prem. So simple, like simple mantra: think big, start small, scale fast.
Wonderful, sir. Sir, with this, we are at the end of the hour. We are on time, and would like to summarize some of the pointers that we are. My misconception, again, I would say, is why fleet management in in telecom. This one, which I got clarified. The second point is how 5G, edge, and smart devices are going to bring up technologies that help us better manage many of the things that we are having challenges at the moment, which will be overcome with these smart devices on IoT. And the data and the insights that we can get using IoT is what we discussed. Some of the key examples that we discussed on the implementation of IoT and some of the parameters that you can look at. We discussed on IoT security of devices, We discussed again on IoT should security should be by design rather
Mm.
than having a device brought and then look at security. These are some of the key takeaways from what I have learned from this session. With this, we would like to thank you and conclude our session. And add to the point is that we are streaming live. This is our 94th episode. We are having this episodes done weekly, 3 episodes, and we are streaming this from LinkedIn live to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter in parallel. This can be seen on YouTube channel of Power of Knowing Forum. Any last minute words that you want to say before we conclude, Sunil?
I just wanted to highlight that IoT is just a small part of the overall solution. See, unless you combine IoT with other technologies, you need IoT, AI, analytics, cloud, powered by 5G networks. It's only when you combine technologies together that's when an enterprise can extract maximum business value, right? IoT is just one small piece of the whole solution, right?
Yes.
So any of your strategy when it comes to digital transformation has to encompass all these key elements that will help you meet some of your business outcomes leveraging digital technologies. IoT is just a small piece of the whole thing. Right?
Yeah, great insight, sir. And definitely agree on that. There is not one component that will serve the purpose. There has to be an integration between all the components and the right technology to adopt and leverage the capabilities of these devices for better analysis and insights. Thank you for the great insights that we had today. With this, we would conclude the session. Thank you for being part of our session, sir. Uh,
Thank you, Prem. Thank you for
Good
the
day.
opportunity.
Thank you.